If you're in a leadership role and you want to see more effort out of your subordinates, this video is definitely for you. My name is Raul Hinojosa, and I'm a certified mental performance consultant. And I wanted to go over low effort syndrome today. So low effort syndrome, whenever when we hear that, you probably are thinking that someone is just lazy, not putting out effort. Okay. With low effort syndrome, it's whenever someone is trying to exert as minimal effort as possible and still accomplish a task. So an example, a soldier running their PT test, and they finish the PT test and pass with minutes to spare, and they just are physically not struggling. If they have low effort syndrome, if they're like showing it, it's most likely going to be because they have a fear of appearing to struggle. Whether they don't want to look like they're struggling in front of their peers, subordinates, or leaders, so they choose to hold back because no one wants to. Maybe it's an image that they're protecting. Maybe they don't want to look like they've been struggling in the run. And a lot of the time this might be because, maybe their unit inherently is a running unit. Maybe they love to run and everyone is generally good at it. So they hold back so that way they're not appearing to struggle. The problem with low effort syndrome is that it upholds a belief that they are static at their current level. So basically, if let's say someone runs an 18-minute 2-mile for an AFT, and they do it and they feel good, they're cruising, they're not struggling, with the belief of wanting to protect their image. Fast forward a few weeks after training the exact same way, they go back and take another AFT or a fitness test, and maybe they have to hold that pace. Maybe they have to struggle a little bit more. That just became a challenge. So if because the goal has been to protect their self-image and not appearing like they're struggling, now their full potential is a little bit more out of reach because they haven't been training to improve. They've been training to protect. This can be applied to just about any other concept when it comes to like completing a task, right? If you're talking about a student trying to excel in school, maybe they're just turning in the assignments and they're not doing the readings or anything like that because they have a baseline understanding of a subject, but then you put a different test that kind of pushes them a little bit more. Now they're struggling because they haven't done the assigned readings. Maybe they haven't done the homework the right way. They've just been relying on what they currently know and just kind of leaving it there. They're putting out minimal effort to not look like they're struggling in school. Workplace, same concept. With these challenges, what happens is that with this low effort of protecting their ego, is the challenges become personal attacks, because what used to be easy is no longer easy because the world is almost progressing without them. You know what I mean? So you're not keeping up with your peers, because naturally challenges are going to be coming up in your profession, in school, things like that. If you're not keeping up, if you're not pushing yourself, you're not going to keep up. So those challenges become personal attacks, though, because if everything's always been easy, now you have questions on your self-identity and self-worth. Do I belong here? Do I have maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I bit off more than I can chew in this idea. Whenever all it took was just a little bit more effort in this subject or in this situation to be able to keep up. So along with the questions about self-worth and identity, they can simply lose interest and stop caring, right? Maybe they go from chasing that good, maybe they're chasing to pass the PT test or chasing to pass class with a particular grade or a particular time on their PT test or scores and stuff like that. Maybe they just don't care and they just focus on simply passing, which further goes into the whole idea of this is where I'm at, I can't improve. This can evolve into like people skipping volunteering opportunities that push them out of their comfort zone, or any other promotion opportunities. Maybe they get offered a promotion but they deny it because it takes them out of their comfort zone. In school, maybe that looks like the kid not pursuing AP classes, or if they're in high school and they're not going to college, like taking college classes to get those college credits early, because it's more of a challenge and they don't want to face that. They want to kind of coast along and that's it. The long-term is show like with that context, with that situation, and putting out minimal effort, there's going to be more of a negative impact long term because everything else is going to keep moving. They're going to be pushed and challenged to a point where they can't keep up where they're at. They can no longer keep up with their base level of knowledge. They have to push themselves out of their comfort zone. Otherwise, someone else is going to come along and someone else is going to take that spot. So with low effort syndrome, it's the goal to protect your image, to not look like you're struggling. So how can we break this from anybody? How can we break this concept from somebody's like way of thinking? The first thing is to acknowledge their efforts, acknowledge the fact that they are doing something a particular way and not the outcome. So if you praise the outcome, that's all they're going to see, right? They're only going to see, okay, I did good. This is what they acknowledged. They're only clinging on to the fact that you acknowledged their success, or maybe only acknowledged their failure, and they don't have anything else to work from. But if you point out the fact that they succeeded because they took certain steps, they're more likely going to look at those steps and maybe try to either improve them or just replicate them. The first step when someone is dealing with that, if you can get them to just at least replicate those steps and then continue to highlight the effort that they're putting into these situations, like these steps that get them to the spot, that's going to be a win. Long term, that's going to help build the idea of trying more. Second thing is eliminating absolute language out of your vocabulary as a leader, and even if you can help them eliminate that, because the moment that they start saying that this is just how things always have been, or I've never been able to do that, or I always fail, when you say things like that, or if they say it to themselves, when you say something, it becomes reality. It becomes concrete. That's all that we hear. That's all that we're saying to ourselves, so it becomes real. And we replicate the fact that we can't do something versus flipping that and replacing the absolute language with actionable steps. So maybe it can start out by saying, I always fail when I don't do this, so maybe I should try this. It could be something as simple as that, like as if someone who's providing some sort of intervention, like as a coach or as a leader, you can introduce that concept to that person, or maybe just saying, this always happens, and then you chime in and say, it only happens whenever you do this or when you don't do this. You're essentially highlighting the fact that it's not the action happening or not happening, it's the steps that are taken or skipped that result in that outcome. Then bringing awareness to the actions and not traits, okay? So again, this is kind of highlighting on the steps and not the individual. So if the person says that they are just a naturally slow runner, or maybe if they're saying that they've always had to put in a little bit more effort on reading or something, and that's more of a trait, or they see it more as a trait, and they just ride on that example, that kind of can lead them to the spiral of learned helplessness. So emphasize the actionable steps and not the traits, right? So bringing more awareness to those things, right? So we can give kind of like a dark example of a narcissist, right? Someone who's a narcissist by nature, the fact that they're a narcissist doesn't get them places. It's the fact that they take specific actions or do certain things that lead them to certain situations, okay? So that's a kind of an extreme example of a personality trait that someone might be born with or someone might have developed over time. But it's not necessarily the fact that they are this type of person. It's the fact that they've taken steps that got them to that point. That's kind of a concept that we have to be able to relay to our subordinates, to our athletes, to our kids, to anyone that we're working with, because it places the power back into their hands, and they can have much more control of the vehicle that they're driving called life, or their performance. Specifically, if we're talking about performance, it shows that they have more control in the steps that can lead to the outcome. That's all I have for today. Appreciate you guys watching. If you guys have any questions, just leave a comment, shoot me an email. Other than that, that's all I got. Appreciate you guys watching.